All right, hello everybody, rockers, rollers, and ravers. It's the Meister from Brews and Tunes. Cheers! I am absolutely excited. I am chatting with the one
Cheers.
and only. Cheers, my friend. I am chatting with the one and only Mr. Alex Gitlin of Mad Painter, Boston rock band. How are you doing, my friend?
Terrific. Glad to have this opportunity. Absolutely psyched to be part of Brews and Tunes, and really nice meeting you in
Yeah,
on a video channel.
yeah, excellent. I'm super excited to be chatting with you, Alex. I mean, first off, I want to say congratulations on the release of Splashed, which is the second album of Mad Painter, which came out just a few weeks ago.
March. Mhm.
Yeah, March, like mid-March.
15th.
So,
March
yes,
15th.
awesome. Great. What a great album. What an amazing album. For those of you watching, if you're not familiar with Mad Painter, you need to get familiar with Mad Painter. Um, what an amazing, wonderful band. I don't even know how to describe exactly what it's like, because I hate comparing bands, but it's such a wonderful sound. It's like Uriah Heep meets kind of the British glam rock of the early 70s. It's just this wonderful, and also a little bit of metal and a little bit of American rock, like 70s rock thrown in there too. It's just this wonderful blend of sound. I love it. It's nothing like what anything you really hear right now anymore, which is so cool to hear. And it's also very honest and very real, and it's not a nostalgia thing. It's like it's just this cool sound. So congratulations on the new album. And I know I'm just kind of rambling at this
Thank you.
point, as I often do, but yeah, just killer stuff. So let's talk about the album a little bit. So this again is the second album of the
Mhm.
band. And kind of tell me about the writing of this album. I'm really curious about the process, your writing process. And I know that's probably a really loaded question, but yeah, I'll let you discuss that.
So, Victor, you said writing, and then it froze up a little bit.
Oh, I
So what
apologize.
else? No,
Oh, I was curious,
okay.
just kind of your writing process with this album.
Oh, it's insane. It's just, I have to go back to the first album for a second because that was done not too long after the first incarnation of Matt Painter got together, which was like late 2015 or early 2016. We got together for a jam. And so I started writing hard and fast a whole bunch of songs, some ballads, some rockers, some this, some that. And we knocked them into shape. And a lot of them wound up on the first album, and it was done on a budget. So a buddy of mine came out of his dungeon in Michigan, drove all the way up to Mass, and we, rented another dungeon. Literally a dungeon with like no toilets, no water, no nothing. It was just like literally, it was a scary room, and it was underneath. It was in a complex underneath the karate studio. So for
Oh,
what it's
wow.
worth. So and so we blocked out 12 hours on Saturday and 12 hours on Sunday, and we knocked it into shape and recorded everything except for the guitars. This would be back in 2016. And, then he took the master tapes back home. He added a guitar because he's a damn good guitarist, and he produced the whole thing. But, the budget on it was abysmal. And therefore, that album, which you can hear only on YouTube and on streaming media, but there's no tangible, there's no CD, there's no, physical media. That album is a self-titled album. If you punch up on YouTube, Mad Painter full album, for some reason it says 2018. Doesn't matter. You'll hear it. Uh, it's got this charming lo-fi quality to it. So my buddy Kenny, who's on bass, Kenny Highland, he calls it. He likes to affectionately refer to it as garage prog. And
Nice.
that's because some good songs on it for sure. Some of them are like stompers that are still part and parcel of our lives, said no question
Oh,
about it.
nice.
But then things move, things evolve, and right now at the moment I'm not in contact with any of the guys that played on this album or the producer. They've all moved on, so have I. So I got a new lineup since probably late 2019, and this is where not only did we write some new songs, but also I've decided to unearth and kind of like resuscitate, if you will, some of the songs that were like languishing on a shelf and gathering dust. Some since 2011, when I was without a band, some since 2017, which we kind of demoed, but with the first lineup, but they never really got past that stage. And some were my older demos made back in 1997 when I was fresh out of Silver Star at the time, and again on my own. So 3 out of 6 songs that I demoed back then as a solo artist, prospective solo artist, wound up being recorded now. So quarter century later, brought him back to life, and I'm so glad that I didn't let him die, and the world gets to hear him, and that will explain the disparate clash or gap between the styles, because you get the heavy rock in the 2 singles that we do, like Illusion and Samurai. You got some balladry like Lie to Me. You got some almost like Elvis meets gospel on The River. You get the Uriah Heep cover, but you also get some pop tunes, things like Love is Gold, which is more Elton John than anything else, or I Don't Know is another older one from 97 that we kind of just put to almost like a disco beat. Because I Don't Know actually is my favorite track on the album. It's not at all heavy rock, it's not at all rock, but it's the kind of a dance, disco dance type tune that I grew up as a kid listening to. Those are the kind of rhythms and the strings and stuff that I heard. So I decided to just recreate all of that on my Juno synthesizer. And then there's a few ballads that I'm very fond of. Unfortunately, they didn't work for past lineups, but we made them work here. I Live for Love, which is kind of like a paean to ELO, I suppose, a little bit, if I were to, guess. Although they said vocally I sound like John Lennon on that one. Go figure, I mean, I love the comparison. It's a compliment.
Yeah.
And then the other one is I've Been a Fool. So now it's time to bring up Dmitry Epstein. He's a good friend of mine, and he's a poet, and he's actually contributed some of the lyrics to this album. Cool. He's written the best songs on the album feature his lyrics, and there are 3. There are 2 singles, Illusion, Rock and Roll Samurai, and I've Been a Fool, which is like a lushly orchestrated ballad.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit of everything in the kitchen sink. I was recently interviewed by Kevin Julie, a fellow Heap Maniac, and he's out in Canada also. And he was like, hey, what's up with the show tunes? What's up with rock opera here? It seems like the album was too long and there's like too much going on. It's almost like there's more than one album here. I go, listen, it's on purpose. It's called the kitchen sink approach. It's when you open up the bag and empty the contents of the bag onto the record. Right. And so there it is. It's a little bit of something for everyone. It's inconsistent in style. It's schizo, but it's like that on purpose, So you kind of like, you listen to the heavy rocker and then you move on to the next song, it's kind of like you get hit with a cold shower. So it's the cold, hot contrast, which is actually good for you. So
yeah.
But the heavier ones are on side 1, virtual side 1 of the album, and the mellower ones are on side 2. So there's the ballad side or the pop side and the rock side. And we're thinking, I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but I might as well just throw it out there. Just knowing what my guys want, because I'm not like doing this in the silo. We are a band. I know that the next one we're going to do is going to be more consistent in style, and it's going to be more heavy melodic rock. So cool. You'll see not as much variation stylistically.
Well,
so we got this out of our system, and
nice. Yeah. And I love the variation.
So here we are.
It feels like, and again, it's not this big. Maybe it is a little bit the nostalgia thing, but it feels like, to me, in a very, very good way, like AM radio in the 1970s. That's what it feels like in a lot of ways, and I love it. It's great because there's this
fantastic.
It's like the Saturday Midnight Special, that old TV show. It's like that, where you have this, all this, like AC/DC and Helen Reddy, and there's just all of this, ELO and all this stuff happening, and it's beautiful and it works and it fits perfectly. And I would argue, no offense to the Canadian fellow, but I would argue there's not too much music there. it's the perfect amount. And I'm very happy
Right.
with this album. So
Fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that. That's what I wanted to do, is like kind of like introduce the listener to all the facets of my musical brain, if you will. So
yeah,
here's
I
the
love
heavy
it.
stuff. Here's the bluesy stuff. Here's the, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's amazing. And for what it's worth, for my favorites, well, one, I loved your cover of Steelin' because I adore Uriah Heep like nothing else. And I thought, and one, I love the fact that you did not, because anytime anybody, it seems like any covers you hear of Uriah, it's always Easy Living. And it was great to hear a Ken Hensley song and on an album that wasn't one of their biggest albums. It's a great album, but it wasn't huge. And I thought, oh, this is, and you guys nailed it. But in your own way, like you made it your own, which I thought was cool. And then for me, as far as original material, just because I'm a metalhead rocker guy, and also because it's a fantastic song, I love Samurai. I think, Rock and Roll Samurai that is a great song. And maybe it's because that might have been the first song of yours I heard from the new album. I think it
Mhm.
was. I think that was the first single, right?
It was followed by Illusion.
Yeah,
And
okay.
what I can
Which is
tell
also a
you
great
is
song.
basically, yeah, thank you. And Samurai actually came out a little bit later. And what I can tell you is about Samurai is that, the way they came out is they came together is the exactly opposite of each other. So I had this idea and I had this melody in my head, and I just created a short demo for Dmitri. And I go, hey, can you put together some lyrics? And he doesn't like working that way. He prefers to put together his own lyrics and then here, put this to music. But I did it
Oh,
that way because I didn't know at the time. So I sent it to him and he says, what would you like the main motif to be? I go, well, how about it's all an illusion? And his original, he was kind of like resisting that. And he was like thinking in terms of, well, how about the reality is for losers? But it doesn't really, it doesn't really flow as smoothly. Realities for losers, so it's all an illusion. We
yeah.
stop and it's all an illusion. Go back into it, right? It's the chorus, and then I started brainstorming like what could we write about, because I was thinking like these philosophical concepts where you're like sort of, you're falling into the abyss and the unknown, and you're kind of just like in a state of flux, and who knows where you're going to land. So flying off the Eiffel Tower, that was my first idea, and that was supposed to be the first line. Flying off the Eiffel Tower, I always say this in interviews, right? It could be one of the two reasons. Either you're on a suicide mission or you're bungee jumping, for which you're going to get arrested by French police. And I've never been to France, but I'm just, So he issued that, he rejected that, and he just wrote his own very good philosophical lyrics. It's about contemplating a life, and it's take a gift from Green-Eyed Goddess. What is that? But
Mm.
like the lyrics are deep. The lyrics are much deeper than what I've ever written, than what I've ever written myself. And then Illusion's the opposite. He sent me this song, well, the text. Circa 2017. He says, can you just proofread it, make sure there's no grammar errors or whatever? I go, yeah, with pleasure. And I put it to melody, and I didn't tell him.
Mm.
And so I didn't record it, but I didn't tell him, I just recorded a demo. I kept it to myself. And then he was going to offer it to someone, like some famous musician, because he interviewed many famous musicians on his website, dmme.net. And that guy apparently didn't bite. Apparently he didn't respond to him. So I imagine there was an outreach where he said like, hey, how would you like to record one of my lyrics? And there was probably no response. And then
Right.
I waited like maybe 5 years, 5 or 6 years before I finally hit him with it. And I said, hey, this is a song. It's fully finished product, mixed, mastered, the whole thing. Here you go. But if you put a veto on it, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to put it on the record. He seemed thrilled, and he says, yeah, go ahead. But I forgot writing that song. It doesn't ring any bells. I go, uh, 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 he acknowledged it. He gave me the go ahead, and that was the end of it. And then we recorded the videos for both of them, and
Nice.
that was a thrilling experience. So both videos are now out.
That's so cool. That's amazing. I love that. I love so what so I would imagine it kind of blew him away when you like here's a finished product of this song, as you said, like, when he's like, wait, what? I don't even remember writing this. That's
That's
great. I
right.
love that. That's such a cool story.
It was a moment worth, talking about for sure. And then there was this even crazier story with half cover, as I call it, Parting Line. Parting Line is a lyric and a song that was written by John Sloman, who was in Lone Star, and he was in Uriah Heep for one album. The album was
Yeah.
Conquest. That came out in 1980. And in '89, he released a solo album called Disappearances Can Be Deceptive. And it's a very '80s pop sounding album. And it's a good one, but it's, a thing of its era.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a moody ballad, Parting Line. So what I did was cheekily, because I didn't ask his permission either, I just grabbed the Parting Line. I grabbed that text, I grabbed the lyrics, and I put it to a boogie tune, kind of like Status Quo or Sweet, da-dum, 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 da-dum,
Yeah.
and I just said, how about this, and just went into a studio and we recorded that, and it came out the balls, as Kenny likes to say, the balls, right? And then all of a sudden it became like a glam shuffle, or like, like a mean British rocker,
Yeah.
and before I know it, again, I'm in the same dilemma right now. So what am I going to do? I can't just release it without his permission. Plus, there's copyright involved. Of course, he's fully credited for the text,
Yeah.
So I approached John. He was very gracious about it. He says, I have no problem you releasing this, but please send me the CD and please credit me. And I did both. And so he was very gracious about it, very
Oh, nice.
genial. And that's how, the one thing he told me was, I wish I thought of that.
That's cool.
His Parting Line is completely different. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
there's a straight cover. The gospel song I was referring to is a straight cover of a Blues 145 called "The River." It's written by Dickon, and Dickon is Jeff Bain from Mr. Big. If you remember Mr. Big from
Oh,
the
yeah.
'70s, he scored a huge hit in England in '76 with Romeo. So it's not Billy Sheehan's late '80s Mr. Big. It's the
Yeah.
British Mr. Big, right? And he was later in Broken Home.
Okay.
And so that was a straight cover. And then how Uriah Heep cover came about is, Kenny's a veteran. I got to talk a little bit about Kenny. Kenny Highland, the bass player, is a veteran of the Boston scene. He came from Midwest originally, and so he was in a punk band called the Gizmos in '76. And he's been through a lot of different bands. You can look him up on Wikipedia and like Discogs and whatnot. And so he's been around the block. He's been doing this for like 45 years, right? So, Uriah Heep, one of his favorite bands. Actually, Uriah Heep is where we kind of all converge. That's one of our, collectively our favorite band.
Okay.
And so he said, how about Uriah Cheap? I go, what do you mean? He says, well, we're going to do it on the cheap. Here's $20. That'll cover 1 hour of studio time, and we'll do a Heap cover.
Nice.
I go, yeah, sure. So he calls it Uriah Cheat because, sometimes it's like a Matt Painter joke. When we get together for practice and we'd like to jam, and we start jamming on like Heap tunes. It can be like Easy Living, Rainbow Demon, Circle of Hands, things like that, right? The
Nice.
Wizard, whatever. And so, yeah, we call it Uriah Cheat because we're obviously not as good as the real thing, but we try, And so, yeah, that's the Uriah Cheap story. And then one more song I wanted to touch upon. Oh, Highway Driver is a cover.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was a hit for a German band, Randy Pie, in '74. And their version is more like disco funky, and ours is straight hard rock,
Yeah. It's very
and it's
rocking.
about like highway driving. It's like, your roughneck, trailer driver type, like the CB, they're talking to each other on CB and that kind of, like the Burt Reynolds kind of thing, right? And
Right.
then the ballad, Let Him Go, it's autobiographical. It's a very special song. And I think I was inspired by two people. Of course, I'm not really as good as any of those vocalists out there. I have my, limitations on my range and stuff, but the inspiration that I got for, singing and actually writing that thing was from, first of all, Frank Sinatra. When he did like That's Life, you can hear that same vibe on the organ. But
Yeah.
then I was thinking, like, how would Freddie Mercury sing it? And I try to belt it out in the studio. I was even making those, like, the hand gestures to kind of like accentuate it and, extend my voice. It helped, of course, with my limited range, I did the best I could. And Lie to Me, which is a throwback to, like, I wrote it back in 97. Another bitter, bluesy, moody kind of ballad. And it sounds almost like it's hopeless. It's brokenhearted, obviously, it's very bluesy, right? But again, to me, that was, so I wrote from the experience. It was like a fresh kind of breakup that I was just coming out of. And I was in my mid-20s. And so, I preserved it for posterity. And here I am in my early 50s and I'm reviving this thing. So it's like a time capsule to me, quarter century later. And we made it, in the beginning, you'll hear like, that song Harmony by Elton John? I think it's on Goodbye to Yellow Brick Road, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right.
So, how it goes, like, there's that mellow piano intro and just a little bit of drums and hello, baby, hello, right?
Yeah.
So I was, for some reason, we had the synergy between myself and Tom Hamilton, the producer, and he made it sound exactly like that in the beginning. But then, you got your heavy guitars, you got the Hammond afterwards, and there's that interplay. So it's a very, it's a bitter song. It's a sad song, but it's profound. A lot of people like it. And then I've Been a Fool is just the opposite of it. I don't know if you ever saw a movie called The Jersey Boys. It's about Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Good movie. How it came about in their career, right? And so I felt inspired by it, and inspiration comes from all kinds of places. And so I wrote this ballad. It's kind of like a maudlin ballad. We orchestrated, we threw a lot of strings into it. I did, right? I did it as early as 2017, but then I preserved the string tracks, the string arrangements from my old Juno, and then the old, we just used that mix basically. And that is more of a throwback to the 60s. I was almost thinking like Dusty Springfield, I close my eyes and count to 10, that kind of thing, right? And then at the same time, if you listen to the lyrics, Dmitri's lyrics, they are suicidal. They are so dark. It depresses the hell out of you. So I still get blamed. It's like, how come you write like you're about to commit suicide? He goes, don't blame me. I didn't write that. He did.
I'm just in the band. Nice.
Dmitri's not in the band, but the thing about Dmitri is he is what Bernie Taupin was to Elton John and what the late Keith Reed was to Procol Harum.
Nice.
He's the chief lyricist. That's really why I kind of like, I'm looking forward to recording more of his, putting more of his songs to, more of his lyrics to music and recording them in the future.
That's cool. I love that collaboration. I love that idea of collaboration with, when you kind of recognizing your own, I don't want to say limitations, but where you're like, okay, like this guy can write and he's not a musician, so we should bring this together and do something. It's like Peter Brown with Cream. That's very, very cool.
Peter Brown is an excellent example. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the other thing I was going to tell you is, he was holding out on me for years because he probably didn't have faith in me. And then something happened because, first of all, these two videos hit YouTube and everybody's watching them, Illusion and Samurai, right? And they are mesmerizing. They're like, all kinds of like camera angles. And I'm sitting there at the Hammond and I'm like, and so on and so forth. And so then I went to, these singles got publicized and they got reviewed and they got on many musical blogs and fanzines and whatnot, and they got a lot of radio airplay all around the world. Basically, you can do this these days, just throw in a little money for promotion and radio stations start picking you up, and before you know it, you're like in Radio Indie Alliance top 10, and we have been repeatedly.
Wow, nice.
And they have these different niches or subgroups under Radio Indie Alliance. I don't know all of them, like Radio Candy Media and this and that, New Fresh Cuts. I can't remember all of them, but on a couple, it was especially complimentary. I thought, not to toot my own horn, but I was like amazed to see Matt Painter compete in the same top 10 with the Sparks and Ian Hunter.
Oh,
I was
wow.
like,
That's very cool.
holy smokes,
Yeah, that's
you
awesome.
know? Even if it's only for a week, it's a moment to relish, you know?
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Definitely. That's
And
so great.
so then he became more, less reluctant to share his lyrics. So now we're working on more of his songs, more of his
Excellent.
lyrics.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's very good news. That's great news. Um, so I wanted to take me back in time. Let's go on the Wayback Machine. Where did this start with you? Where did you come from, a musical family? Kind of what's your background in terms of, playing, keyboards, Hammond organ, singing, kind of, your musical background. Where did that all start?
I think it started when I was 5 years old, and my parents bought a piano and thought that I would be a good student and I would pick up classical piano. And they also sent me to a choir practice and some musical theory and stuff. And the more I learned of it, and it was kind of like force-fed education, if you will, the more I hated it. So I was not a good student. I just couldn't really I couldn't sit still and just play Bach or Mozart, for kids, the adaptations you know, but for what it's worth, it gave me like just your basic, I guess, grammar, musical grammar, if you will.
Mm.
I know how to play a C chord or a D chord, and I know how to switch between the two. And I can play gammas and stuff. So that was my piano education. And then when I proclaimed my independence at the age of 8, and I quit, and I wrote my parents a letter in 4 or 5 different colors
Oh, I love it.
saying I quit. I'm not gonna I'm not going to do this anymore. And they relented, but they also sold the piano. And it was a very sad moment because I didn't have a piano in the room anymore. And then I didn't really care for the most part until I was like probably 13, 14. I picked up acoustic guitar, but it wasn't really to play to emulate any of my heroes. It was more like just to, at school, just to belt out some lewd rhymes
Mm.
to entertain my classmates, some dirtier than others, but that was the humor of it,
Nice.
and it's like class clown, right? And so it wasn't serious. It wasn't anything, Also, my dad's co-worker gave me a few lessons, and he, gave me some jazz chords on acoustic. And so I started like getting it together. And I preferred the nylon strings because, no matter what kind of guitar, if you're not used to it, you're going to grow those calluses, right, on the fingertips, but it's going to be painful for a while. I never learned to play with pick, but I could solo a little bit on an acoustic just for fun. I'm not talking anything serious, right? And then one thing led to another. This takes us to my late teens. When I was 19 years old, a buddy of mine just donated a 4-octave Casio keyboard to me, which is like a dinky little toy that you could buy
Yeah.
at Toys R Us, right? A Casio thing. And so it had some cheesy organ sounds. And I was thinking at the time, my two biggest heroes were guitar heroes. Aside from Gary Moore, it was Richie Blackmore and Rory Gallagher.
Oh,
And I
nice.
was listening to those records and I was trying to emulate what they were doing on guitar, only on keys. Well,
Hmm.
can I cop that Richie twirl or lick or this or that, or riff on a keyboard? Can I emulate that? Well, okay, that gave me the impetus. And then next thing I know, I wound up playing in the house band of at the Middle East, which is a club. It's still out there in Cambridge, right? The weekly blues jam on Saturday afternoons. So I would come in, set up my keyboard atop of 6 or 8 milk crates because I didn't have a stand. And they were playing just straight ahead 1-4-5 blues with very little variation, some slow, some fast, some the Stormy Monday, your shake, rattle, and roll, crap like that. And
That's
so I was like, I was really reveling in those solos, and like, and I thought I was damn good because after every solo they were like cheering and clapping, and I was on top of the world thinking like I'm the best. Turns out I was not good. It's just that they were cheering the youngster because I was a
oh.
baby. Like I was 19 or 20, and they were like these guys in their 40s and 50s. Of course,
Yeah.
they're just cheering a kid,
Yeah, he's
and
trying. He's trying.
my first That's what it was,
Yeah.
but it's like, it gave me enough confidence to progress to the next stage. By late 91, I believe, mid or late 91, I wound up hooking up with a local Arlington band called Junkie Donkey.
Great name.
we shared some of the we shared some of the 70s influences, but these guys were also into like 80s glam rock. You're from Twisted Sister to Guns N' Roses and stuff I don't really care for. And you know, we were kind of like an amalgamation of everything that was going on at the time. And so we had a very rowdy singer who was sometimes, doubling on the drums, and he was like he could pick a fight with somebody out in the street or jump up on the hood of somebody's car outside a club, and like he was messy. That guy was like trouble, like a
Yeah.
walking time bomb. And so, once we was out, we renamed the band Silver Star. And this became more of a glam rock dream because we were all like at that time. I mean, our bass player was into the Pogues and stuff, but me and Rob, the guitar player, we were both like huge T-Rex fans and into
Cool.
Slade and Sweet and Mud, Roy Wood and Wizard, Susie Quattro, things of that nature. And whatever he didn't know, I would fill him in, and vice versa. We kept bouncing these bands off of each other, Alvin Stardust and Gary Glitter and this and that. It was new to us, but we dug it so much. And this is in the early 90s. So, like, of all things, you're supposed to be into Nirvana, but we weren't. We were
Right.
just, we were like living 20 years behind, and in England, not in the United States. And so we went into a studio sometime in 94, and we recorded a 5-song EP called Foot Stomping Music.
Oh,
Grand
nice.
Funk reference there. And
Perfect.
then I wrote 3 songs for it, and one of them I sang, and I'm still damn proud of it. It's called Kindness, and it's up on YouTube, Silver Star Kindness. You can actually punch that
Oh,
up. I can
cool.
send you a link.
Yeah, I need to
And
check
that
that
was
out.
really, that's a song that I'm immensely proud of. Of course, I was much younger and I sang it. I did the string arrangements, and it was like all new to me because I'd never been to a studio before. Then, unfortunately, what happened later was Rob decided to just take off on his own, and he was taking the band in a different direction, and I was out. And for me, that was like a cold shower because for the rest of the 90s, I was just tagging along with different bands, your blues, funk, metal, and nothing seemed to be, because it wasn't my music and I wasn't really, I mean, I was just a keyboard player. I wasn't even singing. And I couldn't really stick around for more than 6 or 9 months because it didn't really feel, I mean, it was still an adventure, it was still experience, but it didn't really feel like I belonged truly. And then I guess the moment came in 2000 when I just dropped out completely because, family took precedence, and moved out of my parents' house, got married, bought a house, moved out to the country. Long story short, I didn't really play a note between 2000 and 2010, which I still find tragic because there
Wow.
went my 30s. I missed it, and I had this nagging pain inside of me, like I'm a musician, and yet I'm not playing, and it's just I couldn't reconcile it. And then I started slowly getting into it. Circa 2010, I bought all new instruments. I started sort of futzing around in my basement. New piano, new organ, XK1. I still got it. It's a terrific instrument. And then in 2011, a buddy of mine out of the blue just dragged me out kicking and screaming into this Russian rock festival up in upstate New York. He says the keyboard player just quit, and we got 2 months, and you got these 7 songs you got to learn. I was like,
Oh,
you're making my head spin. I've not played a note for like 10 years. You want me to play in front of like a crowd of like several thousand people? He says, yes. And so we had some really we had a bumpy ride with rehearsals because the singer was really temperamental, and for a while she hated my guts, then she got used to me to it. But it was rewarding because all of a sudden I'm back on stage and I'm playing in front of like a screaming crowd of people, and
hmm.
I'm only one of the band. I'm not the main character there, but I've got my keyboards, and it just felt like I was like a mad scientist, and I was back in my element. So 4 more years, I could just fill you in. I was in a Deep Purple tribute band called Stormbringer
Oh, great.
uh, for 9 months, and we rehearsed. We never came out of the basement, but these guys are gigging and doing brisk business nowadays. With they got Joe Stump on guitar.
Oh, cool.
I'm sure you heard of Joe Stump, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Wow,
Yep.
that's great.
So they're still around. It's just that I wasn't in the earliest. I was in the embryonic lineup, but I felt like, well, okay, it's kind of, I love Deep Purple to bits, and I love learning John Lord's parts, but I want to do my own music. And so I was in that for a while. Then I was in a UFO Michael Schenker tribute band for a while, again, just
Cool.
as a keyboard player. What was missing in my life is writing my own songs and singing my own songs. And so at some point, since nothing else was working out, I decided I'm just going to put together my own band, right? And then I hooked up with a friend of mine who I'd known for 20 years, and he's a jazz head. He's more like an Alan Holdsworth type. You
Mm.
know, he graduated from like Guitar Institute of Technology in '85, and so he got another jazz head on drums. And so what you're hearing is that trio plus the guitar player, the producer on the first album, and we're playing heavy rock. And these two guys are more jazz than anything else, jazz fusion. I mean, the way they are wired, and so that's why it sounds maybe a little bit like, well, they proved to themselves that they are actually capable of playing heavy rock. And we were both, all three of us were like Deep Purple fans, so it really definitely helped. One of the really funny anecdotes I can share with you is we practiced on the second floor of the Regent Theater in Arlington. Right. And on the first floor that night, and this was in August 2016, guess who was playing? Blackmore's Night.
Oh, wow.
And so we are on the second floor, and we know we're going to catch that concert as soon as it begins. We're going to come down. We're going to take, we're going to be in our seats. We're going to be enjoying the show. But we still got a couple of hours to kill. The Richie's somewhere in the building, I'm sure. So is Candace. They're preparing. They're behind the scenes. I don't know if they heard us because we're on the second floor, but we banged out our own version of Smoke on the Water as best we could. I don't know if he heard it, if he irritated him. He probably didn't hear it. So, it's like as I was belting it out, Smoke on the Water, and I'm playing keys at the same time, I'm thinking like, if Richie hears, I'm in trouble.
That's great. I love what an amazing story. That's awesome. Oh, that's so. So, obviously your influences, kind of far and wide reaching, far reaching, obviously, we've talked Uriah Heep, Deep Purple, and also, the glam, the English glam movement. But yeah, kind of specifics for you. I'm really, in terms of, and this is kind of a threefold question, I guess, very loaded. So I was curious about, for you, I hear what I hear. So, I definitely hear Uriah Heep. I hear Deep Purple. But I was curious about who are the big influences for you as a keyboard player, as a Hammond organ player, as a lyricist, and as a vocalist. Kind of what's the range there?
Okay. Let's see. Keyboardist first. Ken Hensley of Uriah Heep, John Lord of Deep Purple. Unfortunately, both are deceased. Jürgen Fritz from Triumvirate.
Mm.
They did that album Spartacus in the mid 70s. That's what they became known for. Probably Keith Emerson, but it takes a lot of balls to say you're influenced by Keith Emerson because he's like classical and he's like so diverse and he's all over the place, and like, just the way he plays is like, it's more like magic. He's a magician. I'm nowhere near as good, but as far as being influenced, I would use the word inspired, because you don't get influenced by him unless you had classical education. So inspired is a better word. So those are the big four, really, to be fair. I love Matthew Fisher, the organist on the first Procol Harum album, and so he is definitely one of the influences. And then I think as a keyboard player, both electric piano as well as Hammond organ, Brian Auger and the Trinity, and Brian Auger and Oblivion Express. And the final one I'm going to mention is definitely Rod Argent. He's an idol, and he's amazing. He was in the Zombies, he still is, right, with Colin Blunstone, and Argent, his own band.
Yeah.
And so that's really my circle of influences, if you will. Just what inspires me. But when it comes to actually soloing, if it's a jazzy solo, sometimes I switch direction completely and I dip my toe into what I call the circle of big three. The big three jazz organists to me are Jimmy Smith, Brother Jack McDuff, and Jimmy McGriff.
Hmm.
There's more obviously out there, but those are the big three to me,
Oh,
especially
okay,
Jimmy
cool.
Smith. And I'd be damned if I could repeat anything that they did, because again, these guys were absolute and total magicians on the Hammond. But I try my best, and sometimes just for fun, I play along, and they do a solo, I do a solo, and kind of just in my basement, and nobody gets to hear it. But that's how I get my chops, and then when I'm ready for the studio, I can do something similar, you
Oh,
know.
that's
So
cool.
that's as far as the keyboard are concerned. Then as far as songwriting, specifically as a lyricist, I don't know if I have any particular influence as a lyricist, because I'm not much of a poet. I'm kind of like, just sometimes the mood strikes me and I write about something, but I try to keep it non-political and non-current, because the last thing I want to do is write lyrics about what's going on now. I guess the only exception was uh what's that song? Empty Bottles. Empty Bottles was about everything closing. There's a total lockdown. There's nowhere to
Oh,
go, and
okay.
you're like
Yeah.
stuck in your room. All the pubs are closed, and you can't get close to people because you might get sick. So that was the only time I actually violated my own rule. But other than that, I try to, because we're a throwback band, we try to create a time capsule experience for the listener. And so, it's okay to write about Nixon and JFK,
Yes.
right? Relative to the 70s, but it's not okay to write about anybody who's out there now, because it's kind of like, it's not really, it wouldn't feel right anyways with that kind of instrumentation, with that kind of delivery. And
Yeah.
so, my influence, the biggest influence when I write my lyrics, is my life. It's autobiographical. If it comes
Cool.
from a heartbreak or a certain experience that you came out and you're kind of like just nursing your wounds, and some wounds go deeper than others, obviously, and you just carry them throughout your life as best you can, and those become memories, and memories turn into lyrics, and that's the best I can. Of course, there are real poets out there who I absolutely admire. Unfortunately, they're all dead too. Mark Bolan and Phil Lynott,
Oh, yeah.
those the two that I absolutely adore. I know these guys are tremendous, tremendous talent. And really, whenever the mood strikes me, sometimes I even go out and, because I like Italian and French singers too, like Angela Branduardi or
Hmm.
Jacques Dutronc. Um, I grab their lyrics, the songs that I like in particular, and I put them in the Google Translate. And if I read, like, say, the lyrics to 5 or 6 of the songs of theirs, and it gives me an idea of writing my own, I have like a launch pad. I have my own starting point. I know what to write. So some of the lyrics may seem like they're bizarre, they're abstract, but it's actually like a paean or an homage. Like, for
Hmm.
instance, Jacques Dutronc, right? He was big in the mid '60s in the yay movement, in the French beat movement, kind of.
Yeah.
And with et moi, which means it's me, it's me, it's me, right? So that was his big thing, and then he went on to the '70s and the '80s, if I'm not mistaken, right? So an icon in French, perhaps not in France, perhaps not as huge as Johnny Holiday, right? People like that, or Michel Sardou, but still, holds his own. He's very well known. And so our song Jacques is like it's a humorous
Oh,
peon, or again, like an homage to Jacques Dutronc. And then the last thing you asked is, who am I influenced? Okay, so it's songwriting, lyrics, keyboards, and what else?
vocals.
Vocals. That's kind of like, it's hard. I just try to sing to the best of my abilities, recognizing the limitations of my range. And so, again, influences is not the right word. I wouldn't use it. Inspiration. I get inspired by Freddie Mercury. I get inspired by people as diverse as, like, your soul guys, or R&B guys. I love Billy Preston. I love people like, you know, um, sometimes it just comes out of like the most unexpected, for a hard rocker or heavy rocker, places. Candy Staton, people like that, right?
Hmm.
And I'm, they all had to that old, like Detroit R&B sound of the early to mid '70s, right? Where they kind of morphed from R&B and soul into pop and disco, and there were like really some tremendous vocalists out there. So sometimes you just draw inspiration from those guys, and I'm thinking like, okay, I'm on stage and it's completely different genre, but this is what gives me the energy that I feed on,
Nice.
And then and I just put it into the microphone. And I guess it's just me, some people just say, Alex, you're sound unique, nobody else sounds like you sound like no one else. I'm fine with it.
Yeah, that's great.
It's like Matt Painter now. I'm very glad to hear people actually telling us that we got our own patented sound, that you can't really you can't confuse it with anybody else. It's
No,
us.
no,
As
yeah,
we
not
get
at
together,
all.
we know our influences. And, let's just say our influences are, and this is the most important thing I'm going to say, are converging and overlapping circles. So I'm in my own universe, and what really matters is like what we love. Let's just set aside all the curiosities, but let's just say what we love. Like I personally love Uriah Heep, Deep Purple, Status Quo, Slade, bands like that to bits. I grew up
Yeah.
with them. I still love them, right? Manfred Mann's Earth Band, Nazareth. And then let's just say we overlap on with a guitar player who has his own style, but he likes Deep Purple Mark One with Rod Evans
Oh,
and Spooky Tooth. And
oh,
so that takes us to Kenny, who digs that, but he's also into Vanilla Fudge and Iron Butterfly and Mountain and Grand Funk and MC5 and Blue Cheer. And then you got the drummer who's very diverse, can play in any style, but his favorites, I guess, is jazz and prog. And so these are like converging and overlapping circles. So we all meet somewhere in the middle. One
right.
of the songs that we haven't recorded, but I'm really looking forward to recording, is called Stand Your Ground. And it's a heavy, pissed off rocker. It's the heaviest thing we've ever done. And I'll just give you a preview. It sounds like maybe like when Lemmy would get really, really pissed off, he would write something like that. So some people said it sounds like the first or the second Iron Maiden album with Paul Di'Anno. And to me, it's more Motorhead than anything else. But then because I play keyboards and I do a solo in the end, they start comparing it to, well, this is what John Lord would do. Well, yeah, but what if it was like a trio, like
Mhm.
Motorhead? There's no keyboards, right? What would it
Yeah.
sound like? But I lost that argument. I just wanted to sing it. I wanted the guitar player to just carry the tune. But he says, no, your solo is too good to ditch, so let's keep that. But yeah,
Nice.
it's easily our heaviest track yet, and we're gonna record it in the next album.
Cool. Very cool. Oh, I love it. That's great. That's great to hear. Oh, that's
Okay.
awesome. Um, oh yeah,
Can you
so
still hear me?
yeah, yeah. Did I freeze up on you? Oh. Oh, that's very cool. I love hearing all of that. And I love the diversity of your influences is what is a joy to me. And you hear that on the album too, which I think is very cool. And especially that proto metal, like a lot, specifically like Uriah Heep and Deep Purple and bands like that. But then also that, the English glam and the American just straightforward hard rock, that early 70s hard rock stuff. I love the fact that that all pulls together in specifically in Splash. Um, uh, and it's cool because you can hear those influences, but again, it's still wonderfully original music, but it has those elements and those nods to those bands, which I think is very cool to hear. I did want to ask you because we've chatted about it a little bit, and it's come up, and you mentioned Iron Maiden and Motorhead. So obviously, I'm a big metalhead, as you can see from behind me, and my Judas Priest T-shirt.
That's
So,
a classic.
and I know, and you and I are friends as well. And I know you're a metalhead too. So I was curious about, I wanted to chat with you a little bit about metal, which may not be so much influential on the album, but there's still some undercurrents there. So I was really curious about kind of your big metal, loves. Like, who are the big metal bands for you?
I'm probably not going to surprise you with anything, in a sense that I like what most metal fans out there of certain vintage love, which is, your Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Ozzy, the first two albums, first three albums, right, with Brad Gillis.
Oh yeah.
Actually, was Brad Gillis on Bark at the Moon?
I don't even know if I don't. Ugh, I don't think so.
Probably, right?
Well, he played live, but I don't.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, so I don't. Yeah, he's not actually the guitar player on that album, but he played the tour.
But okay, gotcha. And you know what really sort of formed my mindset, musical mindset, before I got it like heavily into the 70s and later 60s. So the pivotal moment for me was like circa 1990. But before that, as a teenager, and I still love all those bands. They're still in my collection. So don't get me wrong, I didn't forsake them. Maiden, Priest, Crocus, Motorhead for sure. Accept, without a
Oh,
doubt,
great
right?
band.
Sabbath, 70s and 80s. Let's see. I mean, yeah, definitely AC/DC for sure. We've already talked about Purple and Heat, but you know, Purple is its own family tree. So you got
Yeah.
Gillan, you got Whitesnake, you got Rainbow, and it's kind of like all these really important branches,
Yeah.
right, off of the tree that are almost just as important as the trunk,
Yeah.
right? And then, so that's kind of like my heavy metal universe. But then I go as obscure as sometimes I like notice a Liege Lord post on your Facebook wall, and I'm
Oh, yeah.
like, yeah, I'm into them too. I like
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
you know, or Tyrant, you know, things like
Oh,
that. So it can be definitely. As a youth, like say in '87, I discovered two bands that are still very much with me. I'm still a big fan, and you won't hear it much in my music, but they are Praying Mantis. Beside the
oh,
point, Pretty
love.
Maids, the Pretty Maids,
Oh,
and
great band.
Running Wild.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Yeah.
So Running Wild and Gravedigger are the two German bands that I've collected every single album they've ever done.
Nice.
Because once you get stuck on something, and you know, like especially as a teenager, like I'm in my early 50s, they're still with me. I'm still
Yeah.
following. You know, I bought every single Motorhead album that came out until Lemmy's passing, right? And so for a lot of people, it was like, well, another Motorhead album, whoop-de-doo. Well, someday you won't have that, right?
Yeah.
And so that day came. And so before it did, I was like faithfully, I was following Motorhead up until the very end.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of like my metal answer, if you will.
I love it. I love it. And I love the fact that you mentioned Praying Mantis. I think they're one of the most underrated, incredible bands ever. I love Praying Mantis. I think they're genius.
Time Tells No Lies is my favorite album.
Such a great
Another
album.
one I absolutely must mention, even though they were kind of like Blink and you missed them, is Angel Witch. So important
Oh,
to like new wave
great.
of British heavy metal,
Yeah,
without a doubt.
that movement was beautiful. Just such an incredible
Incredible.
movement. Um, so Alex, this has been an absolute joy chatting with you. For the listeners, for the people watching this, if you look in the description below, there are links to Mad Painter. Uh, Definitely check these guys out. If you have not heard them already, go on their website, you can download, you can buy the physical CD. You will not be sorry. Splashed is an amazing album, and just especially if you're a fan of 70s rock and you know, hard rock and pop and glam, you will not be sorry. It's just like a wonderful blend of those styles. I'm thrilled by this album. It's amazing. Again, Alex, thank you so much. This has been an absolute joy chatting with you, my friend.
So definitely go to www.madpainter.co.uk. It's a UK
Yes,
domain.
yes.
And that's where you can buy both the physical CD as well as digital download if you prefer.
Awesome. Very cool. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.